And we are live. Welcome everyone to the March monthly meeting virtually of the Colorado Landlords Association. This is Bill Bronchick, and I'm here with my guest, who is also a COLA vendor, Mr. Mike Hoover from Mavi Property Management, a seasoned professional in the rental management business in Colorado. And we have some people from other places too joining in. And so a lot of this is going to be applicable nationwide, the universal strategies of property management techniques and dealing with, COVID and everything affects everybody everywhere. But we're going to also focus on some Colorado specific ordinances and nuances that for those of you in Colorado will find very helpful. So with that, welcome, Mike. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Bill.
All right. Pleasure. So if, by the way, people have questions, we do have a Q&A thing. Don't click raise your hand. I don't know what that does. But if you click on Q&A or the chat thing, you can post in your questions and we'll pose them to our guest speaker tonight. So Mike, why don't you start with a little bit of background of what your experience is in managing rental properties?
Yeah, so I'm the owner of Mavi Unlimited Property Management. We've been in business since 2000. I've been the owner since 2013, 2014. We manage like 550 doors kind of all over the Metro Denver area. And, 2019 came and went, and then 2020 showed up. And then around March, things started to change pretty drastically. A year later, we've certainly got some war stories, but all things being considered, most of our residents have been paying. We've evicted a couple of folks that haven't been able to pull it together, but the laws are changing every single week, and the moratoriums that have been put out there by the CARES Act and Governor Polis keep getting extended. So the landscape is just ever changing. But
yeah. 2 weeks, just 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Know what they said? Just lock down for 2 weeks. Just buckle up for 2 weeks and this will all be over, right? So here we are a year later. So let's start with some of the basics. Federal regulations. We got this CDC moratorium on evictions. How does that apply, and who does it apply to?
Yeah, so the CDC came out with the moratorium as the CARES Act was sort of winding down. The CARES Act put a moratorium in place, but that only went for a certain amount of time. And then the CDC came up with their own moratorium that was similar with some slight differences. Originally, I think it was through the end of like September, October of last year. Mm-hmm. And then they kept extending it. And then I think as it is right now, it's through March 29th. But the general consensus is that'll probably be extended again. Right. So basically, it's Center of Disease Control saying, we're worried about there being a huge influx of COVID-infected people without homes and what that could do to infection rates and everything else. So that's come up with this strategy to not let, possible infected people get out into, the open environment. Let's keep them confined to their homes, I think is the general idea. But the reality is that
because in New York City, I read that 61% of people hospitalized were sitting at home.
Yeah.
1% of people hospitalized were homeless. So being homeless, while sad, I don't see how that affects COVID. Now, if they say, well, they're afraid if they have no place to go, they're going to cohabitate with other people and too many people in a house, that sort of makes sense, but it doesn't make sense why pot stores and liquor stores are open and other things are not.
Yeah, it's interesting how the Center for Disease Control is dipping their toes into tenant landlord law. So I think, if that was the intention, it sort of evolved into, we know there are some folks that can't pay, that's used this as an avenue to, keep them in their home for as long as possible and then fight the big bad landlords who would normally get rid of them. And on top of that, there's been a lot of other restrictions on late fees that normally we would use as an enforcement strategy. We haven't been able to do that in over a year.
That's a local thing. That's a Is that a Colorado law, right?
That
Colorado,
was
or is it
that was through the CARES Act, though.
CARES
The
Act?
CDC extension of the CARES does not specifically mention late fees, so
Right.
Polis is kind of
Right. I know the
but
state has a restriction on late fees, commercial and residential.
yeah,
And furthermore, the state order, I believe, says that you have to give a longer notice than the normal notice, right? Still,
correct.
notice of non-payment.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
10
been
days.
reduced.
What do they move it
It
to?
was it was as high as 30 days, and now it is back to 10 days again.
Oh, it's back to 10 days. Okay. So,
Yeah,
for those of you who remember in Colorado for years, it was a 3-day notice and then you go to court. Then the legislature a few years ago changed it to 10. And then the governor signed an ordinance or a directive, or whatever you want to call it, executive order saying it's 30 days notice, which doesn't mean anything because you can't evict anyone after that anyway, really, for the most part, except unless they don't, fall within the CDC guidelines. Let's talk about that for a second. So the CDC order, I understand that it's up to a certain income limitation, which again, gets out of the science realm into the the fairness or sympathy realm. It seems like, because I don't see why it would be different if someone makes 50 grand a year or 150 grand a year, whether or not they can be evicted. Doesn't seem to make
yeah.
any
Again,
sense, but
dipping their toes into tenant protection
right,
versus health and safety, I think. But
right, right.
um, yeah, the big thing with CDC right now is that there is paperwork that tenants can get their hands on that has a whole litany of reasons why they can stay in their rental.
Mhm.
Basically saying, did COVID affect you negatively in some way? Check yes or no. And
Right.
that filling out of that paperwork prohibits us from moving forward with court proceedings. For a while, we had to provide that with anyone that we posted for non-payment. That has changed. We don't have to hand
Provide,
that paperwork anymore.
right,
But it is readily available, and I think folks are starting to realize that it's an avenue for them.
right,
And as long as that paperwork's been filed, the county clerk is just going to throw out the case and not even let you
right,
schedule.
right. Well, it was interesting. As we were talking earlier before this started, was I represented a friend of a friend who was being evicted for non-payment, and he had legitimate legal defenses, but the landlord was just being a bastard, so to speak. And so we said, okay, you've been affected by COVID. He's in the car business, and his income was definitely affected. So let's fill out the CDC affidavit. So he filled out the affidavit. I made a motion to dismiss it, and the judge, this was in Douglas County, said, okay, the CDC order is in effect. You can't proceed with a hearing for eviction unless you want to challenge the efficacy of the affidavit. So, of course, about 3 weeks later, we get a motion from the landlord saying we want a hearing on whether or not that's true. So the judge basically ruled against my client and said, well, one of the bullet points in the affidavit is I've tried everything I can do to get assistance. So when the lawyer for the landlord asked him, well, what specific things did you do? He couldn't name the programs that he looked at. He just said, well, my wife looked online at several programs and it appeared that we didn't qualify for any of them. And I don't remember the names of them. And the judge said, too bad, you're out. And that was very surprising. It was very surprising. And he just ignored all his defenses. He says, we're having a hearing just on the affidavit. And then when he said, I don't believe the affidavit, and by the way, I'm issuing an order of possession, a writ of possession. I said, wait a minute. This was supposed to be hearing just on the affidavit, not on the merits of the case. And the judge said, no, he doesn't really have any defense. I read his defenses. Those are nonsense. And so we went to file an appeal, and then we settled with the landlord, resolved it. But that affidavit applies to who gets the benefit of that CDC order.
Say again about who gets the benefit of it?
It's for people who are being evicted for what? For non-payment, or does it
Yeah,
also apply?
no, strictly for non-payment. You are still allowed to pursue eviction for, let's say unauthorized occupant or
Mhm,
substantial violation on the lease. If
mhm,
there's drug use or something extreme like that, you can still file those
mhm.
evictions normally. But the majority of landlord cases are
Or
rent
non-payment.
related, especially now.
Right. What
So yeah,
about
it's strict.
what about an expired lease? Because a lot of people, I know a lot of landlords are saying, well, we're just going to do month to month now, and then just terminate it on 30 days notice and evict them for a holdover. Is that still valid?
Yeah, you can try. I think that even though it's not technically financial related, I think that the judge is still going to say, when the tenant wants to leave, they can leave. But until that time, we're not going to put them out in the street. Again, going back to what if they are out there, I guess, conceivably infecting others or what have you.
I don't understand. It's outside. Homeless people are outside. I mean, there's the whole other issue of, do you feel bad for these people? Do you want to help these people? That's another issue. But legally and practically speaking, I heard that a court in Texas struck down the rule when some landlord sued and said the CDC order was not valid.
Yeah, I've
Um,
got headlines from
Texas
three
court
different states
said,
this week.
yeah, we agree, but that's not our
Yeah,
jurisdiction, of course, so it doesn't apply to us.
yeah, two or three states in the last week have had judges go against the CDC's declaration.
Mhm.
The other factor that is still out there too is the I think this might still stem from the CARES Act that is not fully wound down, but the federally backed mortgages are also applying to this. So if you have something that is still FHA approved or
Mhm.
federally insured in some way, those evictions are also within the realm of.
So the CARES Act, or which rule applies to that, or is that
So
just
that would be
HUD?
that'd be a remnant of the CARES Act,
Okay, so
and then
CARES Act says
more blanket.
if you have a tenant who is Section 8, or you have a loan
Correct.
with FHA.
Or if you, like a lot of landlords, you had a single family home as your primary residence, and then
Right.
you moved out, kept it as a rental. If you have a federally insured mortgage, Fannie, Freddie, something like that,
Fannie Freddie.
that'll be counted as not evictable.
Is there anything in the CARES Act or the executive orders or the $1.9 trillion that was just passed by Congress that pays my mortgage?
So there are some options for collecting money. Um, Most of these are on the state level, though.
Right.
The CARES Act did have some limited funding. I can't even remember the program right now because it's so long ago. I think it ran out pretty quick, but there was some insurance in there for government insured loan holders to get some recouping. Right now, I'd focus on the state level programs that we've got going on. City of Denver has a big one, and then the property owner preservation program is the big state of Colorado one that
Mhm.
conceivably you fill out the paperwork, you show the administrators that your tenant has filled out the CDC paperwork, and they'll cut you a check for the rent that's delinquent. A lot of problems with it, but I think
Is
that's
anybody
the
getting
common
a
goal.
check from that, or is it just a theoretical thing?
So we've gotten checks. The problem that we're seeing right now is that we will submit the paperwork and we'll get a confirmation email back, but we're not able to follow up on that confirmation. And we can leave a lot of voicemails, but we don't seem to get calls back. But we have in fact gotten a check or two out of the half a dozen or so of these that we
And
filed.
was that a
So
state program?
that's a state program. Yep, that's through the state of Colorado. It's
Okay,
called the Property Owner Preservation Program, and I've got some links that
great.
I can send out after this.
Yeah, that'd be great. I appreciate that. If you forward over to me, I'll send them out, or if you have them handy, just post them into the chat box window there.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I can do that. One of the sidebars of this property owner preservation program, the POP program, this is what most folks seem to be gravitating to, is that you do have to have your tenants fill out the CDC paperwork, which, as we just talked about, then prohibits you from evicting them. So
Right.
you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit here, hoping that the POP program pays out. But if it doesn't pay out, or if it just takes 6 months, you're unable to do anything in the meantime because you've pursued the CDC paperwork.
Right. It seems grossly unfair, and I'm sure a lot of people watching who are landlords agree that the government is cutting checks to restaurants and business owners and all people affected by shutdowns, except landlords. There's
Yeah.
no, there's no SBA program for landlords. There's no PPP for landlords. I mean, who's going to pay our mortgage and our taxes, and we have to maintain it? We can't, I assume a landlord can't say, well, we're not doing any repairs while you're not paying rent.
No, that certainly isn't the case. You need to keep spending the money. You have to continue making the mortgage payment. Yeah, your liability does not end. This is definitely a one-sided thing for sure.
Yeah, very unfair. So those are the federal. We got the CDC thing, the CARES Act. We got state programs and state limitations. What about city? City of Denver, I know, has some additional things, don't they? Additional.
Yeah, so there's a program called the TRUA, the Temporary Rental and Utility Assistant program, and this is through Denver city limits only. I got another link here that I can throw up there. So this is just within the city of Denver, but same type of thing. You provide an application and proof that that your tenants have filled out the CDC paperwork, which again is going to limit your ability to evict, but it's just a different pool of money basically that the city of Denver has put out there saying we will reimburse landlords for unpaid rent. And as of right now, there's no limit that I'm aware of on the amount. So if it's 6 months behind, conceivably you get reimbursed for all that. Again, just the backlog of this. I think at last count, the POP program had 7,500 applications or something absurd like that.
Boy, oh boy. It's interesting. The city of Denver passed an ordinance that allows people to have more cohabitation in houses, which is, it's been a long-term trend anyway, but there's been local ordinances in most cities to say you can't have more than X number of people per bedroom because it's a health and safety thing. Now the city of Denver apparently has lifted that restriction. And so if ever there was a COVID problem, having 3 families in one house would seem to fly in the face of the logic of the CDC thing, right?
Yeah, so the interesting part about that too is it restricts the number of unrelated people that can cohabitate together, but there's an unlimited, the link that I've got here has like a graph that breaks it down. You can have as many family members living under one roof for that individual unrelated person. So now it's within a single family home up to 5 unrelated people, but below that, as many family members as each of those 5 has. There's no restriction on that.
I mean, because I've always thought there was like a conflict between federal and state law on that, or local law. Federal law says you can't discriminate by size of family, familial status, right? Mm-hmm. But the local ordinance says, yes, you can. You can bounce people who have too many family members. Let's say someone has 6 kids, mom and dad in a 1-bedroom apartment. Of course, you're not going to rent it to them. That's not safe. And it violates local ordinance. Now you're saying the city of Denver says, go right ahead. So the real question is, can you still, as a landlord, say, it's just too much wear and tear on my stuff, or I feel like it's not safe for you? Or are you discriminating?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it is technically bumping up against fair housing. And I think that you open yourself up to that liability pretty good. Mm-hmm. For us at our company, we generally use a guideline of no more than 2 adults per bedroom. Mm-hmm. 2 adults and a child, or 2 children, something like that. So we will hint at that when we are advertising or talking to a prospective tenant. Mm-hmm. We have not ever tried to enforce an eviction on that, because the assumption is as soon as we do, some public defender is going to pick up the case and say, hey, no, right, this is a fair housing violation.
Right. And so it's also from college, or they have a new child. Obviously you can't, really can't enforce that. But I mean, logically, if a family of mom, dad, a cousin, and 6 kids wanted to rent a 1-bedroom, I would argue fair housing doesn't say you can't discriminate, period. It just says you have to make, some sort of, they're a protected class, but you could still as a landlord say it's not safe.
Right.
It's health and safety. It's, I'm trying to protect these people. I'm just curious what a judge would say about that.
Yeah, I think a local judge would see the light on that and say, this is a one bedroom apartment and you've got 15 people in there.
Right.
Just for us as, something to chase after, it's kind of well documented that, the fair housing will hire people to try to get landlords on breaking these rules, whether it's
Right.
gender discrimination or, animal service animal discrimination or
Right.
whatever. And
Right.
so I wouldn't advertise it, but yeah, if you feel it's an unsafe situation, and again, we've never tried to evict someone over this,
Right.
so it's a
Right.
soft rule, I guess, is the best way to describe
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, just, find another way that's legal to bounce them. Say
Right.
if they're like, if you have person A and person B, and person A has a 400 FICO score and person B has a 600, when the person A has 9 kids and person B has 3, you can't discriminate saying I'd rather have the one with 2 kids versus 6. That's illegal. But you could say, well, I'm taking, the minimum FICO score is 550. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I just threw a link up to there, up to
Right.
the decision on it. I think the overall trend, like you said, has been to put more people into dwelling units like this, and whether it's an affordability issue like we certainly have in Denver, or just cohabiting. I think there's a lot of micro apartments now, a lot of communal
Right.
living space. I think this kind of allows for those to work. Um, if it's an Airbnb and you've got 15 guests or 20 guests, renting a huge house for a weekend, something like that. There's a lot of workarounds that are needed.
Right.
And again, just the affordability aspect too. I think more roommates are going to make their monthly rent cheaper.
Right.
But it's interesting the change. In college, it was always a question of, was our fraternity legal or not? That was always the big question. We've got 30 guys in here. Is that cool or not? I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to question it or challenge us on it, but skirting some rules.
Right. Right. Well, I don't think it was the cohabitation. I think it was everything you guys did under your roof. Anyway, that's another issue. So, is there an opportunity with this? Like, if cities say, well, you can have as many people as you want in a house, could we just say 2 families welcome and multiple families welcome, unlimited, and say we charge 25% more?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that would make sense, and you certainly see it from the short-term rental perspective all the time.
Mm-hmm.
People are charging on a per bedroom basis, and that's how they're coming up with the rates. Now,
Right.
Denver's a whole different animal with short-term rentals. There's a lot of
Right.
licensing rules there.
Right.
But outside of the city of Denver, I mean, you're setting pricing based on how many people you could fit in there.
Right, right, exactly. So, 5-bedroom house obviously is going to rent more than a 3-bedroom, but if ordinances allow you to put, the equivalent of a 5-bedroom house number of people in a 3-bedroom house, you may want to just say, hey, we're okay with that, but we're going to charge 2,000 instead of 1,500.
Yeah, I would recommend you put in your ads, a per person amount after a certain threshold. You just don't want to have the appearance of applicant A was
Right.
a family of 3, applicant B was
Right.
a family of 8.
And you don't want to discriminate based on the size of the family, because that is illegal under federal law. But to say, you can't advertise if you have 4 people, mom, dad, and 2 kids, it's 1,500. But if you have 8 kids, it's 2,000. You obviously can't say that.
Right.
But you can hint at, large family. Well, I guess you can't say large families welcome either. That's not really. I don't think that would be legal either. But how would you couch it to attract someone, like, say pet friendly? A lot of people, and then they charge more for the pet.
If it's a big house, you can certainly say per bedroom we charge X number of dollars. We've done that all the time, and that's a legit way to go.
That's
about
good.
it.
That's good advice. Thank you. Okay. So practical matter. So you were managing my properties, and I just got my list from your one of your employees of about 70% of my tenants paid on time, and the other 30% are they're waiting for checks from local housing departments or charities or other programs that are helping pay their rent. What's been your policy with that? You can't charge late fees, right? Or you're limited on what you can charge?
Yeah, it's been a full year since I've been able to charge late fees. So,
period. No late fees, period, in Colorado.
Yeah, nothing at all. You can charge back for bounce checks and things of that nature, and court costs can also be charged back, but no late fees at all in the last year. So there's no teeth on that due date. Really is effective.
Right. Well, you could say, "Hey, just write me a check in advance. Don't worry about it. If it bounces, no big deal."
Yeah.
Kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, you can't charge a late fee. So basically, if a tenant calls you up and says, "Well, I'm waiting for a check from the local housing program, and I'll have it on the 20th," you can't charge a late fee.
Correct. Yeah, we say great. Looking forward to the 20th.
Great.
That being said, we do still proactively post every month. We wait till about the second week, and then we do our postings for non-payment. Now, again, they're 10 days instead of the 30 days that they were a few months ago. So you can aggressively threaten eviction. I think that's your best tool. But for us as a policy, we've just been heavily encouraging payment plans. If the tenant is saying that they're struggling here, make us an offer and we'll accommodate, because we know that we can't really evict anyways, especially if you sign the CDC paperwork that's readily available. So make us an offer. We'll take it. We'll tell our property owner, hey, they're going to make good on this within a couple months, but for right now, they've made a half payment or whatever. And I think that's the way we've been going about it. Those tenants that completely ignore us, that kind of ghost us, if you want to use that phrase, and we just don't hear from them. Those are the folks where, eventually we'll present an offer of, hey, we haven't heard from you. You've got a court date going a week from now. If you just vacate now, if you just give us the keys back, we'll cut the debt in half, or we'll take the debt away completely. With our owner approval, where we're trying to encourage our owners to say, hey, just get rid of the debt. Let's get a tenant in there that does want to pay, because the reality is there is still a huge influx of new tenants. Vacancy rate is still historically low.
Right. Well, they have to go somewhere. They're going to need a referral, and if they have an eviction on their record, which another thing Colorado did was pass a law that says you can't report to the credit bureaus until there is a writ of possession, right, or judgment, a writ of possession. What if the writ is never executed? Still, can you report?
Yeah, it used to be anytime that you sent a filing to the courts, that would show up on a record. And so we'd be able to pull an eviction report, but now it is just cases that actually went to fruition.
Court and the landlord actually won and got an order.
Yeah.
Okay,
so you really have no way.
That's an incentive to a tenant, right? To say, listen, you're going to go somewhere else, and it's a tight market. So if you're competing with other people with better credit and better referrals, if you have a full-blown eviction on your record, you're going to be limited of where you can go to. A landlord is not going to look favorably on that. But if we withdraw the case and you leave, then your record's clean. Your court records are clean, in terms of your credit report, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think right now we know it takes so long to evict tenants that if they will leave on their own, we're heavily encouraging that, because it just the 6-month backlog that we're kind of facing here, you want to be able to flow through them a little bit faster than that. So
yeah, even if they said April 1st you could start evictions again, how long do you think it's going to be before we can actually get rid of a tenant? Right through the writ and the sheriff, and how long is it going to be?
First of all, I think that the laws, it's going to be extended. I think the moratorium technically ends on March 29th.
Let's just say for argument's sake, April 1st, free and clear. Go ahead, do your evictions. How backed up are they going to be?
I think extremely backed up. There's every county sheriff who ends up being the one that's serving the writ and then facilitating the actual physical eviction, where you move the property out of the unit. They've got a stack, this tall, that you're on the bottom of that stack, and they'll get to you when they get to you. We have been able to do some evictions in the last year. The court date itself has been relatively smooth. I think that they're saying no to so many potential cases. Once you get through that backlog of here are the people requesting it, let's take out all the people that don't meet the requirements because they're federally insured or the CDC paperwork has been turned in. And so it's a much smaller list at that point. And so those are going through pretty quickly still. I'd say, start to finish, it's probably 3 weeks to get a court date and be in front of a judge. The problem is once the judge says, okay, landlord, you can have possession back, that's where we see a pretty big backlog.
Right. And that was I know Colorado, we'll get to this a little bit later, just a kind of like a teaser on this, but Colorado has some new proposals that are just bizarre. And one of them is to extend the notice, which is 2 days, from the sheriff to get out, to a much longer period, like 14 days or 21 days or 30 days or something like that. They're really hammering landlords bad in Colorado. When I came here in 93, it was the Wild West. I mean, I came from New York City, doing evictions for clients in high-rise rent control buildings, probably the worst place in the world to be a landlord, right? And I came to Denver and said, wow, this is great. 3 days notice, throw them out. And even if they pay after 3 days, you could refuse it. And then 3 weeks later, you get a writ and you're evicting people. In New York, it was insane. I mean, people would, get the sheriff's notice and run you with an order to show cause in court and say, I have 1/10 of the rent. You can't evict me. And the judge would say, yeah, put them on a payment plan, just force the landlord to do it. And it was so bad. So when I came to Denver, I just said, wow, look how easy it is to evict people. This is a great place to be a landlord, but not so much anymore.
Yeah, every legislative session, it seems that they're making it a little bit tougher.
Yeah. We'll get to those in a little bit, but I got a question. So do you have any landlords that are just paying people to leave, who fill out the CDC affidavit, or just aren't paying?
We got landlords saying, you owe us $5,000 for 3 months of rent. Just get out and we'll waive it completely.
Right.
And some people are receptive to that.
What about people who are like 2 months late? They owe a couple $1,000 and the landlord says, I'll give you $1,000 if you're out in a week. Anybody doing that?
Yeah, the cash for keys, I mean, part of it, not to toot my own horn here, but our approval process doesn't have a lot of folks in the situation to begin with. And so we haven't handed over a wad of 20s for keys in years and years now. But I'm sure that, any incentive you can give, do it, because you want to have the property back. You want to get possession back, and then put someone in there that does want to pay. And again, the vacancy rate is low enough right now to where there are a lot of prospective tenants that are looking for a place to live, and there's a huge line of people ready to pay you rent if you can just get rid of the
market. Still a landlord market, thankfully. James has a good question here, which is related to that. So if you want to remodel the property to sell it after the lease is up, can you ask them to leave? Well, you can ask. But you have to give, if the lease is expired, theoretically you can go in on a holdover proceeding. But again, the backlog, the sympathetic judges, and blah blah blah, it might, if you're planning on rehabbing it and selling it and you're going to make 80 or 90 grand on it, it may behoove you to pay $2,000 for the tenant to leave now, so you don't have to make a mortgage payment for 2 or 3 more months before you can get them out.
Yeah, 100%. I think anytime you're looking to do a listing and you've got a lease date that just doesn't coincide well, offer the tenant a little bit of cash. If your rent is $1,000 and you throw the tenant an offer of $2,000 or $3,000, again, you're going to do plenty better on the sale these days with appreciation being where it's at. Most tenants aren't going to say no to a couple months worth of their mortgage expense to move out that they're planning on doing anyways. You're just moving up the timetable and giving them cash to facilitate it. So I can't think of an instance where we've offered someone a couple grand to get out before their lease was up and they turned us down. Most folks are extremely receptive to that.
Yeah, on my Havana house, we did that, if I recall. Yeah. I wanted to put it on the market, and I said, well, leave a month early and I'll give you some money. And we gave them money, and they said, oh, can we have more time? So it did. It still worked out okay, but this is an interesting question. Is it legal to require a tenant to pay by credit card? Like require, as a condition of the lease, auto billing to a credit card every month?
You could do that if you wanted to. I think
that's legal. I have clients who own apartment buildings that say you must pay through the portal online.
Right.
There's no other way. You can't mail us a check. You can't pay us cash. You must log in, register online, and pay online. Now, if you pay online, you're getting charged. They charge a quote convenience fee for the credit card of 3%, to cover the merchant fee cost. You're forced to pay that 3% as a tenant in that building. So I would think, yeah, you could say, well, if you rent my apartment, the only way you could pay is by a credit card, auto billed every month, or a debit card.
Yeah, we do that with all of our tenants. So they're forced to create a portal login, and we want an online payment. We will take checks. It's not like we turn away money, but we have like a 98.5% adoption rate of electronic payments. Now, I do know that a judge is going to make you refund that credit card convenience fee if that ever comes up and you find yourself in front of that judge in that situation. They're going to say you can charge a rent, but the convenience fee, you're forcing that on the resident. You can't really make them pay. If they pay it willingly, that's one thing. But
right.
Again, if
what if it was in the lease up front? I agree to pay a convenience fee.
Yeah, I still think the judge, the case I'm thinking of in particular, the judge said, you need to refund those convenience fees. You can make the tenant pay rent, you can make them pay utilities, but the convenience fees on top of it, that's your choice for giving them that option.
I don't think it's worth appealing for 3%, but no. I would imagine an appellate court might overturn that.
But online payments are great, and if you're a landlord doing it yourself, there are plenty of platforms on there that you can sign up for that will allow you to take ACH payments, which don't cost anything typically, or if they do, it's 50 cents a transaction or something cheap like that.
Right. Is there a popular platform that you recommend for that for people who self-manage?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of.
I remember HotPads used to do that for free.
Yeah, I'll find a couple that I can. I'll find a couple that I can send to you later. There's a couple of platforms out there that are designed for the small do-it-yourself landlord. I know Zilla's coming out with something of their own right now, but I'll find you a couple.
What about they have these? I saw an ad for this when I was on Facebook. They said where you can, as a tenant, sign up for a service that they verify with the landlord that reports to the credit bureaus their rent history if they're good to improve their credit.
Correct.
Those services.
Yeah, there is some reporting services going out. Landlords have to agree to sign up for it, but basically we have a pool of tenants that we have agreed to do this. Sometimes, landlords will charge a fee to the tenants for the service, but we'll send their rental payment history to this rental verification reporting system, and it becomes kind of a congruent with the credit report. You've got the FICO scores here and the credit card payment histories, and you've got a whole other section here called rental payment history, and it'll show check online payments, and so it does kind of give that additional verification.
Interesting. Do you encourage, because that would be a good thing to tell your tenants, it's a benefit for them, it improves their credit because a lot of them have bad credit, that's why they're renting. Not everybody rents because they can't afford a house, but there's a lot of people who do rent because they can't, they don't have the credit to get a loan. So it would be an incentive to say, to pay on time, because once they sign up for it, they don't want to screw up and pay late because that gets reported, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And again, it does affect their credit positively with that online payment, good payment.
So that would be a good thing to tell the tenant, hey, sign up for the service that'll improve your credit if you pay on time. And if they start getting a little late, you could tell them, hey, remember, if it worked both ways, when they asked me if we were on time in March, I don't know if I'm going to say yes. So yeah, that's an interesting one. So, and generally speaking, have your landlord clients been raising rents on the renewals or in COVID, or are they just saying, taking sympathy and saying, look, I'm just grateful to get a payment?
Yeah, I think for us, it's been a season of flat rents more than anything. The beginning of the pandemic, we were seeing renewals actually be a little decreased. Owners would say, my goodness, if they want to stay for another year, take 10% off. I don't care. That's fantastic. I think more or less that we've seen flat rents. We'll push for an increase sometimes, but it's minimal these days. I think $25, $50 a month. It's interesting. The vacancy rate is extremely low, but rents are still not going up because there is so much drama in the financial landscape.
Right. What would you say, approximately what is the percentage of tenants that are, let's start with not paying at all?
Historically, I think if you look at the entire residential section, it's about 90% paying. I think our company, we're hitting like 95, 96%, which is where we normally are. So residential has been remarkably strong. I think commercial suffered a lot worse. The office buildings, some of those are just hammered.
Repurposed as something else.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about this. We talk a lot about this wave of evictions in the media, and I think the reality for us has been that most folks respect the fact that they need a place to live, they need a roof over their head, So let's not forego that bill. Let's forego a different bill if we really are struggling. So,
Right.
for us again, our payment collection's been pretty solid, and we're
So
above
even in
average.
COVID, you're still getting 95% paying?
Yeah, we're hitting about 95%. Now
Now,
we are
are we talking about paying and paying late or just paying period?
paying and paying late. I think we're posting twice as many people for non-payment as we would have in 2019, but the collection of delinquent rent has been remarkably high.
Yeah.
And throughout the residential sector, I think the average is about 90% collected. Again, lots of delinquent rent, but
now how much of your business is multifamily?
about half of it. So we're 550 doors. We probably have 250 or so small apartment building doors.
Okay. So are multifamily, do they have a higher rate of non-payment right now or than single?
Yes. Yeah. And on the difference between multifamily and single family as well is that you are seeing increases with single family homes still getting through pretty easily. I think that the trend has been get out of the big congested environment to having more of your own space. And so if you have a single family home to rent, you have been able to raise that rent. Certainly with a new tenant and even on renewals, I think you're going to see people pay more of an uptick.
Right. Because I know apartments, especially the high end apartments downtown, the word is on the street that they're giving them away because
20%
people just moving out of the cities because offices are shut down. They're working from home. They're like, why do I need to be downtown? Why don't I move to the suburbs or the super suburbs and come to the office twice a week or not at all? And I think that's a fundamental shift. I don't just think that's COVID. I think this Zoom thing is really changing the world.
No, we're into year 2 now, and how many of us have employers that have no plans at all to reopen the office, or if they do, they're saying we'll address it in 2022. Nobody really knows, but it seems like there is
renewal rates on offices are like falling like a lead balloon. Because fundamentally, because of COVID, and just because people kind of realize, well, wait a minute, do I really need this giant office of 18 offices in my suite? Or could I operate virtually or semi-virtually with maybe 4 offices and we rotate employees?
Yeah, absolutely. Or shift to a WeWork type of setup where we have access to a conference room or office space when we need it, but we're not going to pay for it every month. There's no reason to anymore.
Is Regus Virtual Offices a public company?
I don't know if they're public or not.
As I was saying, if there's any virtual offices that are going public, that'd be a good business to invest in.
WeWork certainly tried. I think
right now.
WeWork says they'll get there maybe one day, but
yeah,
it's a mission.
Because because I've had an office for 20 years. I started with a virtual office 20 years ago before even people knew what a virtual office was. And it was a little weird to people because they'd walk in and like all these names on the marquee and like, where's Bill? And who are you? It's a little odd, but I'm thinking when my lease comes up in a year of just going back to virtual again and, having branch offices all over town and just, working from home or maybe just going to the office a couple of days a week and working by the hour to pay for a conference room or an office. And I don't meet that many people these days. And I think that's everybody in business. I was just talking to a lawyer friend of mine. And he says he hasn't met a client. He used to go out, he worked from home forever. He was not just a virtual attorney. I mean, he was like a bum attorney. He worked from home and he would meet people for lunch. That was his thing when he met a client. And I said, you still doing that? He goes, I haven't been out to lunch in a year.
Yeah.
I talk to people on the phone, I Zoom them. But I haven't been out because he's afraid he's got diabetes and he's afraid, to go out, and might catch something. That's understandable. But I think that's a fundamental shift. And the question is, what happens to all these office buildings? Are they going to be repurposed?
Yeah, I think you will see some repurposing in the condos. There's been talk of that with hotels as well as office, where we need to figure out how to put a kitchen in here now, but we have plumbing, so let's make that shift and let's turn it into an apartment. But again, those A-class skyscrapers downtown are having pretty high vacancy right now as people are.
They're in big trouble. Trouble. Yeah, my office building is, it's a mid-'80s, nice building, but not that new. It's like an A class still, but I look at that and say, on my hall alone, there's only two tenants in business
Right.
on the whole hall. And I look at that and say, well, what could I do with a building like this? Could I make it into mixed use? Maybe half condos, half offices, work where you live.
Yeah. I think that's a really good idea. Um, the other thing, the trickle down effect of the high vacancy rates in the cities and some of the new construction stuff is affecting those in other sectors too. You'll have a 20% vacancy rate in the skyscrapers downtown, but that'll end up getting that landlord or developer to offer a concession like reduced rent or free rent for 6 months, or free or reduced security deposits. And those on down the food chain have to start to adapt as those demands are
minimum wage, right? Raising minimum wage.
exactly.
If someone's getting 15 and now everyone gets 15, you got to give that guy 18.
Exactly.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about some of these new proposals that the Colorado legislature is looking at. I don't know exactly what I saw the original punch list, and I don't know in committee. I'm not sure where we are, what's been killed yet, but some of them off the top of my head, one of them was raising the 10-day notice to 14 days, which I think is the longest in the country for non-payment of rent.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they were going to make personal service of a summons in a landlord-tenant case, which is nutso. Anybody who's in that business knows that, a tenant is not going to pay and you got to get personal service. They're just not going to answer the door.
Yeah.
And people can work from home and sit at home forever. So good luck getting personal service if they never leave the house. Someone writes here, Eric says from New York, says New York now has 14 days notice for rent. It used to be 3 days. Okay. So it won't be the longest in the country. It'll be tied for the longest in the country. I never thought I'd see the day in Colorado, but that's.
I could be wrong, but I believe that one has passed committee, and that probably will get turned into law. Yeah.
Just unbelievable. Another one that they're talking about is 60 days notice to terminate a month to month instead of 30.
Yeah, correct. That I think will end up being defeated. The Apartment Association of Metro Denver has a pretty robust lobbying effort, and they've asked the landlords to get involved. And so there was a threat at one point of, hey, 50 of us property managers are going to come down there during the committee meeting if you like, or we can just settle something right now.
Right.
And so they took some of the teeth off of that, I think.
Lobbying does help. People show up at these committees, show up at these hearings, make your voice heard. I remember when they passed we're working on the Colorado Foreclosure Protection Act, where they had all kinds of crazy things in there. And as president of the local RIA group, I testified at the committee hearings. I hired a lobbyist. I found out who was in charge of this bill. They referred me to the person at the legislature who was drafting the bill, and then they were very gracious and let me put in some input and shape the bill. And so the final bill wasn't so bad. And so folks, visit the Capitol building, find out who your senator and Congress people at the state houses or the state Senate, and be a pain in the ass. Be one.
We are their constituents, and ultimately they do work to serve us.
They work for us, so remember, these people work for us, and they don't really work for anybody. They don't get paid. And what are some of the other ones? I think there was one really bad one that I'm trying to remember what it was that I just thought was really preposterous. There was limiting on, I'd say if it's month to month, you can only raise them one time a year.
Right.
That was another one.
And I think it's a percentage limit too, no more than, I want to say 10%. Again, I don't know if that's out of committee yet, but that was the talk of you can't raise it more than.
And there's also, I know people were carrying on. I got an email about there's a rent control bill in the House, but there's a rent control bill in the House every year. Someone proposes it every year, and it usually gets knocked out.
I think that people tend to overreact to that one too. I mean, the effect of a rent control bill on the average landlord that owns a handful of houses or condos in the city, that'll never really be something they see.
Yeah. Well, places like, New York has rent control. New York City has rent control. And it's pretty bad. And you pass it down from generation to generation. People living in the Upper West Side of Manhattan in a 7-room apartment paying $900 a month, market rent is probably 15,000. That's preposterous.
Right.
And then they may have something called rent stabilization, which is a little different. It's not, they allow you reasonable raises, but you have to jump through hoops. You have to have inspections, you have to fill out forms, you have to pay fees every year, and then they give you permission to raise the rent. If you don't do that, you get in big trouble and you get penalized if you don't follow the hoops. So do you see something like that coming to Colorado, or at least the city of Denver, maybe?
Yeah, I think what they're talking about right now is a stepping stone to that. Let's put a cap on how much you can raise the rent to every year. I mean, I think when we talk about what rent control, that's probably the most practical application, I guess. And then everybody's expecting some sort of increase just to keep up with inflation as time goes on, right? And appreciation and all that. And so I think that that doesn't hurt the landlord as much to say, well, I can't go up more than 10%. Okay, I was going to do an extra 25 a month anyway, so I'm still well below that. There's a big gap there between, I'm trying for a 50% increase here. But for those of you that have long-term tenants where you haven't, raised the rent at all, and then you finally feel like it's time to, or their circumstances have changed and you feel like it's time to put the screws to them a little more, you might come into some problems on that.
Right. We were just talking too beforehand, that about, having long-term tenants is a good thing. But not always. Not always. If you're not raising, a lot of landlords make the mistake of not raising rent on a long-term tenant because, you want to reward good behavior, but you're losing money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, over 5 or 10 years, you could be 25%, 50% less than the competition if you're not careful. Right. The one thing I'll say is that landlords that are obsessed with market rent, I've been researching on Zillow, and I know that this condo is worth $1,800 a month. My tenant's only paying $1,750. Right. By the time you get the place ready for a new tenant and deal with the vacancy, you've spent thousands of dollars to try to get an extra $50 a month. So be smart about it.
Right.
I generally tell people it's cheaper to keep a current tenant than find a new one, but over time, obviously.
Yeah, over the long period of time, if you're not raising rent over a 10-year period, just to keep a tenant, who doesn't bug you. And by the way, that's not always a good thing. Well, he never bugs me. And then after 10 years, he leaves and you find there's mold and leaks and, all kinds of problems with the house that they didn't want to bother you with because they're afraid you raised their rent.
So one of the questions here deals with someone trying to get in. It was Angel said, my property manager won't let me inspect the interior of my rentals right now because of COVID-19. I mean, I can touch on that. I think that your lease should allow for you to get inside.
Sure.
And it's reasonable to have access. We limit it right now. We make everybody wear a mask and it's one person at a time. But
my property manager won't let me?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. My property manager inspect the unit.
Just go do it. What is he going to do? Fire you?
Yeah, I would tell Angel.
Just go do it.
Feel free to reach out to me if you like, Angel. We could talk about your property management needs. But your property manager should inspect, or you should be able to get access. There's no regulation for that right
now. And I don't know. Now, some, I don't know every city or state and jurisdiction in this country, but there may be restrictions right now in some areas that won't allow you to inspect unless it's an emergency. But I doubt it.
There's nothing like that in Colorado that I'm aware of.
Like in Colorado right now.
As long as you get proper notice.
Another nightmare that I'm sure we can expect soon is like the city of Boulder has rental registrations. Would you see that coming to Denver or Colorado as a whole?
Oh, 100%. I mean, City of Boulder started it, but City of Westminster, City of Littleton,
City of Aurora. City of Aurora started.
Yeah, they did. You're right, and so did the tiny little town of Sheridan as a registration too.
So pay an annual fee to somebody at the city, and then they come out and inspect it.
Correct. Yeah, they'll come out and do a safety inspection, give you a punch list of items that you need to take care of. Wow. City of Boulder is the most strict right now. I mean, they really do make you do an inspection that costs you money, and then they'll give you a punch list of things you have to do to bring it up to code or to their standard. The city of Westminster will do that too. They'll give you a punch list of what they want done. Um, City of Boulder is the most expensive right now, but yeah, I see every municipality probably trying to roll that out. Denver has talked about it. There's just a lot of units, and that's a lot to manage, and not enough staff in the city to really handle a workload like that.
Right.
But I would assume that that's coming down the pipeline at some point.
Yeah. I remember speaking at a club in Ohio a few years ago. I'm trying to remember what city that was. It's the closest one to Detroit, and I can't remember off the top of my head what that city that was. But the city was requiring landlords on the inspection to basically, do things like remove asbestos in the whole house,
Mm-hmm.
you know, put in new efficient water heaters and things like that. Really expensive stuff for landlords. And these houses are worth 40 grand, in this area of Ohio. And I don't know if it'll get that far. Maybe City of Denver does that, because they're very liberal. I mean, how far is the city and the state going to go to lock down on landlords? And I mean, I just knew this was going to come eventually because it's supply and demand. You remember, how things were in 2005 when everyone could get a mortgage and nobody wanted to be a tenant. We had 15% rental vacancy. It was horrible. Obviously, the pendulum swung the other way, and we have down to 2-3% vacancy in an average. And obviously, landlords are in their driver's seat. Some landlords are abusing it, so people bitch and whine, and so the government has to come in and take over. So, how far is the pendulum going to swing before landlords just say enough?
Yeah, I think that we tend to see Seattle kind of setting the trend on a lot of this stuff, and Boulder would be the most local example of whatever the West Coast did. We're going to try to implement that too. Boulder had their smart reg policy a couple years ago, where you had until the beginning of 2020, I believe, right before the pandemic, to have all of their efficiency guidelines up to code. And it was expensive. I mean, we had clients that had to put in new windows, furnaces, and roofs and insulation all in one foul swoop. Now, Boulder property values are high enough to where most landlords took out a home equity line if they needed to, because there's plenty of equity. But expensive ticket items for sure. And I do think that that'll come to the city of Denver. I know that building code requirements have been there for a while, where you need to have a certain percentage of green space. The rooftops need to be facilitating oxygen producing plants and the things of that nature. So it's not going to be too long before there's additional requirements for private landlords.
Do you see how many landlords have called you up and say, Mike, I'm bailing. I've had it. Have you had it?
Not yet. I mean, the restrictions are there, but we have to remember we're seeing 10% appreciation, and the cash on cash return. There's a lot of benefits to investing in traditional real estate. I would say that this is the most consistent game in town, and the stock market's been on a massive tear in 2020 if you were able to dump money into that. But traditionally, real estate's the consistent moneymaker, right? It's just 6% every single year.
Right. Well, last year, I just got an email from one of my realtor friends, and they said 2020 prices went up on average 10%.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Colorado, and they're expecting 2021 to be the same thing because no supply. Now, who knows what's going to happen beyond that? All this borrowing we're doing, interest rates have to go up because of the economy. We may see some massive swing of foreclosures after they lift the moratoriums, which could result in banks taking back properties and then flooding the market with inventory, which is going to be a negative thing for prices. Do you see any of this affecting the rental market, though?
I mean, right now, I think the payment rate for residential is still relatively good, and so I don't believe the media reports of this wave of foreclosure that's coming. I think in office buildings, okay, maybe there's a lot of vacancy there, and a lot of people not paying.
Retail stores,
we evicted as many tenants in 2020 and 2021 as we did in 2018 and 2019. Right. We haven't seen a huge uptick across the board. I'm in a lot of landlord associations, and we share information. And then again, it seems like 90%, of rent has been collected every single month after month. And so I don't think we're going to have some massive wave of foreclosures linked to evictions, personally.
Do you think, though, we're going to see a massive wave of motivated landlord sellers who say, had it, I'm out of this market, or I'm out of the business or I'm out of Colorado.
There's always a more expensive market, right? And so even if we as local Coloradoans feel like Denver's overpriced and our capitalization rates or our return rates are crap, some guy in California is like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, in
Los Angeles,
California, you lose money for 10 years and then you sell an
yeah,
appreciation. That's just the game. But what about,
yeah,
and I mean, I thought about this. I was thinking about this today. I go, maybe I should sell all my properties as a bulk and 1031 them into an apartment building in Nebraska where, they're not punishing landlords for being landlords.
yeah, yeah. But the regulation is going to extend, right? I mean, eventually
Yeah.
it'll come out, and everybody will have some level of regulation to follow. But yeah, I mean, I think that Denver is still relatively solid, but it is getting more expensive.
Yeah, I was just thinking, all these regulations is going to frustrate some landlords to the point where they're going to say, "I'm out," and then maybe
Yeah,
get a
if the commercial rental rates weren't doing what they're doing right now, the rate of return on owning like a standalone Walgreens or a Jiffy Lube or something like that in rural America is significantly better than anything you buy in Denver. And so I have seen landlords say, screw the apartments, I'm going to buy this little
Dollar
gas station,
General, right?
Nebraska. Yeah, Dollar, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was hoping to see, maybe not now, but a lot of motivated landlords who get into trouble because the CDC thing and all the restrictions, and they don't have payment for 6 months, and they're self-managing and they're doing all the wrong things, and they're going, "Wow, I just got to get out of this business and I'm going to dump this property." The opportunities for other landlords who are not, getting emotional about it and just saying, "Hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This is temporary. Pick up some deals."
Yeah, absolutely. Those that are willing to put in the extra work, I think, can do really well.
Okay. Why don't we take a few questions on the Q&A or on the chat, and then we'll wrap up with that. Those of you who are new, I want you to go over and check out colandlords.com, colandlords.com. That's the website for the Colorado Landlords Association. We started a little over about a year and a half ago, and wow, we were off to a great start last January. We had live meetings and 50, 60, 70 people for a couple of months. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and we went virtual. And then they opened up the hotels in the fall of last year. We had 3 meetings in all 3 meetings, the total number of people who showed up at all 3 was, I think, 30 people. 3 meetings. That means 10 people a meeting. Obviously that's not good for business. We went back virtual again. It costs money to hire a hotel, and it's not barely worth it for 10 people. Although we do appreciate, of course, the people who do show up and network. We're hoping to get back to that in a couple of months, when everyone's hopefully reasonably vaccinated and we reach some sort of herd immunity and go back to live meetings again. But check out coloradolandlords.com. We have a lot of business vendors that we recommend there, and Mike and Mavi Property Management is on there as well. You can get his contact information. Your website is, again, what? Mavi Unlimited, MAVI?
Correct. I'm putting some links up there right now. I just need to share
great.
with you.
Okay, great. There's your link.
I've got some links on there to either the various the POP program and the city of Denver emergency fund, as well as a link to just our standard blank lease if anybody wants to steal.
Angel says, "I live in Northeast Boulder, so Zoom is great for me." Angel, you got to get out. You got to get out of your house and meet people and network. That's where the deals happen, at the meetings. And trust me, get out once in a while, come to a meeting. You could stay. The hotel we do it at is at Parker and 225. It's the Radisson. I think the weekday rate is about $70 a night. Just stay for the night and network, and then you can go to the bar afterwards, have a few drinks with some landlords. So we'll take a few questions, and while the queue is filled up, Mike, tell us a little bit about some of your services that you do offer, and what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, so we are full service property management. We will find tenants for you. We'll manage those tenant relationships. We'll provide you with itemized accounting every month, and we'll handle any maintenance that needs to be accomplished. So the idea here is to make anything that you own into a passive investment for you. If you are spending your time right now driving to showings and dealing with angry tenants, or even non-angry tenants, there's a cost for everything, right? And so we try to make it a passive investment for you, so you can focus on the real job or something else that makes you more money.
Yeah, and I say I've been using Mavi for years, and you guys do a fantastic job. I've gone through several property managers until I found the right one, and your staff is fantastic. I email them, and like that, I get reports or things I need. You know, once in a while, you have a new kid on the block who you hire who says the tenant wants a new screen door, and I said, in the lease, no. You know, because they're probably tenants too. They don't understand. But, you know, it comes with the business. But, you know, for the most part, you know, you guys have done a bang up job. Communication is awesome and quick. If there's ever an issue, I just email you direct. And the real question is when do we go into the steakhouse to smoke some cigars and have some martinis and lunch? You
That
know,
sounds fantastic.
you know, I found it interesting, you know, restaurants now are open at like what, 50% capacity in Denver. You can't get a reservation on a Friday night unless you want to sit out in a tent.
That's true. Go to Cherry Creek on the weekend, and that
It
place
is
is bustling.
so
It gives
on
you hope.
Tuesday, usually I make my open table reservations for the weekend in downtown or Cherry Creek, and I can't get a reservation any steakhouse, any major restaurant unless you want to sit outside, and which I don't
Yeah,
want to
it
do.
gives you hope for a future of returning to normal, right? The
Yeah.
bustling activity.
Yeah, bustling activity, and and it's, you know, I feel terrible for these businesses, you know, who had to spend so much money with all these tents outside and the heaters and, you know, these ridiculous regulations, and they're wiping down everything, which isn't complete nonsense. You can't catch COVID that way. Even the CDC admitted, and I don't know why the people don't know this, but 3-4 months ago, CDC said, well, I think we were wrong that you could catch it off an inanimate object. It's not likely, you know, it's really more of an airborne virus, you know, that you can catch it unless you shake someone's hand and touch your eye, like something like that. You're not likely to catch it. But meanwhile, you go to a restaurant or an elevator or an escalator in the mall, and they're wiping down everything as if that, you know, I think that's just lip service, you know, to say, look at us, we're wiping down everything, makes you feel a little better, you know. I think it's unbelievable, but you know, we'll get over it. Those of you who are landlords or thinking of becoming landlords, don't be discouraged by the regulations, by, you know, the COVID things, by the new bills. Real estate rentals is still a great game in the long run because you got income, you got appreciation, you've got tax benefits, and where else? I mean, frankly, where else are you going to put your money? I mean, yeah, the stock market's up to 32,000, but it's ripe for a bust. It is ripe for a bust. And real estate, especially the rental market, there seems to be no end in sight. I remember saying with Caroline years ago, you know, about 3-4 years ago, we saw these new A-class apartments going up, and we were shaking our heads going, who the hell is going to live in these things? They're going to be empty. No one's going to fill all these things up. They're all filled in Denver and in metro area. You know, they're pretty much all filled, aren't they?
They are. Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, the rents have gone
Yeah.
up so much. In the last,
Yeah. And we're starting to see pockets of, you know, I noticed there's starting to see pockets downtown where you see banners saying, you know, 1 month free, which, you know, I think that's not so much the economy as it is COVID, that people
COVID
moving
related.
out of the city.
2 years from now, when everybody's vaccinated and we're no longer scared of being around groups of people, you're going to see the city be a lot more attractive, I think.
You think so? You think people are going to start moving back into the city more?
Yeah, I do. I think Denver in particular, you know, we've got a really strong urban core. We're a great little tech hub between Boulder and Denver. And I think you're going to have a lot of young professionals that want to be back in the city.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think the young crowd, especially downtown, is a very young crowd. And, you know, even though they don't necessarily have to be home, they could probably, a lot of those tech people can work from home and probably will continue to do that. They've got the income and they want to have fun.
The other thing is Denver is still an affordable city compared to New York or LA or parts of Chicago. I mean, look at Zillow along Colfax between, you know, let's say Broadway and Colorado Boulevard. What other major city in America can you find a 1-bedroom apartment for less than $200,000? I think Denver has a lot of attractive options still.
Well, you look at San Francisco. You know, San Francisco until recently was the average rent was $4,400 a month. Now it's dropped 25% in the last year because of COVID. I don't know if that'll go back up again, but you know, the average rent in Denver is nowhere near $4,000 a month.
Someone's asking if we manage properties in Lafayette and Longmont. We absolutely do. I'm actually sitting in my my Longmont office right now on Second and Main. So yes.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm not seeing those questions. Oh, there it is. New messages. Okay, I see that. Here's another question here. Let me see if I can find it. Do I have an entitled tenant? Yes. Okay. They both return to work but are not catching up past due rents. They are counting on special city program to pay the arrears